Thanks, Stuart. That's a great introduction. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I feel quite privileged to be in the opening slot. I'm going to talk to you about growing trust in HSBC via social media. I like Stuart's point about having a sense of a digital front line. I think that's kind of what we talk about today. Maybe we didn't have this a while ago, but now it's much more of an established story. We want to have our digital front line working to an operational baseline. They're trained, they understand, they're empathetic. All these things are kind of vital to actually make some success. You're going to have to work with constant fine-tuning. You don't get it right first time. So it's often a way of just kind of, you start with a straw man and then see how it goes. And you're optimizing and making sure things go well. So this story is the journey of HSBC. I was privileged to be in the right place at the right time when this whole social media question is like, how do we make good use of it, really came up. And it was really about sort of working out what attributes do we want? Where do we want to really excel here? And how can we make this work? So today, we know that banks need to convince their customers that they're there for the everyday. So they've got to be mindful, empathetic, they've got to be ethical, they've got to really know how to work with customers. It's not just about sort of reflecting internal stories. It's about saying that they can reach out to customers. And that is like, we understand that it's a human touch point at social media today. But what about when you're kind of exploring it for the first time? What do you actually say? Well, how do you convince people this is how you want to work? So this is a presentation sort of like to walk you through the journey. I think it's an interesting point of, okay, how big banks suddenly adopted it and now it's become pretty, I think, doing a good job on social. And really, hopefully, you can really be inspired by this. I think it took a lot of imagination, perseverance, and just kind of willing to get on with it, really. So let's go. So today, we have over 100 accounts in over 30 countries. Back in 2012, 2011, it didn't look like that. There were just a few random accounts. It would be a YouTube channel here in Brazil, or it would be a Twitter account in the UK. It would be First Direct doing something interesting. And so it was just a matter of like, how do we unify this? How do we make a collective understanding of our work? And it was more of a housekeeping story. So like, okay, what do we have to do internally just to make some of this a bit tidier, a bit more accessible, and a bit more kind of consistent to our customers? So it's about kind of like really sort of mapping out the opening sort of activities, actions that you need to get through. So about HSBC, I mean, this is more just kind of just to impress upon you that it's a big bank, but really there is a high expectation of regulatory compliance, all right? This is where you are expected to work with your regulatory standards locally. You are meant to kind of be fluent and train your teams, your front lines actually cognizant of all the expectations of not only a customer, but of how regulatory watchdogs view you as a bank and your behaviors. So if there's a complaint, if there's a query, you respond correctly. It's, you may functionally answer a query well, but emotionally are you connecting? One of the points Stuart made. It's all about those things. So it's, we have a huge library of policies that are really comprehensive, very factual, very instructional. So it's about saying, okay, how do you sort of switch on something like social media, which is seemingly very human and very kind of abstract and maybe not that kind of straightforward to regulate. But it is, there are expectations of a brand to be on social. So it's about saying, okay, let's make sure we are, vibrant and actually sort of connecting well on this. So it's not just a tick in a box. It's actually something that's done well, and we get a good quality service there. So that's kind of a little bit of the background. My role, I am a global head of social media governance, which is a bit of a byproduct of the social media industry. I don't meet many people with my title. So I am part of a 22-person dedicated social media team. We are spread across UK, Hong Kong, and China now. It didn't used to be like that. We are mainly based in Leeds, and I'm kind of in the London office, but we connect 1,600 colleagues on social media. So they have a good use, that's an internal use, their agencies, customer agents, everybody actually has a good access, and it's clear how it works, right? We pay attention to the structure, the operational standards, making sure that it's all clear and we can actually blueprint how we work. So journey that I'm going to explain to you is like how it actually started. These were the examples of social media governance lapses that didn't exist a few years ago, that phrase, social media governance. So it was just lost, compromised passwords, posts live with no evidence of approvals, unknown third-party apps on accounts. All this is like stuff that really bothers us, okay? So we just want to be sure that, we know what's going on. Sadly, the fortunes of Facebook, Twitter, everybody, we're sort of finding out that they were used to doing things in a different way. Now it's become much more ethically minded. We hold them to account much more. We expect to behave more like publishers, and if anything. There is a sense that regulatory change is needed, but the nature of those required standards isn't quite clear, isn't quite articulate yet. So we've tried to kind of create a gold standard of governance that's saying, so if somebody does hold us to account, we actually can explain ourselves very well. So we can sort of spot sort of breaches of our values and treating customer fairly. It's quite a lot that we're able to do. So this is kind of where I am today. Why is social media governance important? I think there are three main really sort of tenets to it, really. It's an operational foundation. We can grow consistently. We can actually sort of map ourselves out in a consistent way. We say that way Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, etc., are working. The actual process of creating content and posting and responding is actually something which is a good routine, and just established with good approvals. So we kind of try and standardize that and make sure that all our accounts can work to that same standard. It's a defense against brand erosion, so you don't get people playing up saying, okay, this is a logo, that's a logo. It's actually, no, we are all very consistent, and we have a brand tone of voice. We know how to respond. There's an expectation of a brand experience that we are actually advocating. It's not just saying that this is just a managed interaction. You are part of something far, far bigger. And then we do also protection. So we do a lot of oversight. So we spot fakes, impersonators. That is actually one of the pivotal parts of my team. We kind of look at fakes and seeing people impersonating HSBC, providing fake customer service, fake credit card fast tracking, fake mortgage applications, or even trying to be one of our senior management or one of our heads of business in countries. All of that, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter, we sort of have to police that and make sure that we get takedowns, because we know the true source, we know the true URLs of our accounts. So we just make sure that we have to act quickly. You only need a few seconds to connect with one customer, and that one customer can have a bad experience. And that's kind of that's really what we wanted to suggest here, is that any fakes have a shelf life of minutes, rather than just kind of being up online for a few days and forgotten and unnoticed. And then allowing innovation. That's an important part of what we do. So when we say there's an operational standard, we can say that we can build on that going forward. So you can tweak, you can optimize, you can actually learn. You learn from metrics. You can have better discussions, better ways forward. And I think that's kind of where we are now. I think social media is less about just being about content posting. It's a hybrid of things. You have live, you have groups, you have ways of interacting with brands which are different now than they were a few years ago. Anyway. So I joined HSBC in 2013. I was a contractor. I was only supposed to last for 6 months on a website contract. But I actually sensed there was something not really happening with social media. My previous job, I was head of online at Canon Europe. I looked after the EMEA websites and social media accounts, and then I went to HSBC. And I just saw that it was just slightly disorganized. There were some random accounts that just didn't look very branded, didn't look kind of really correct. So I kind of started sort of really hustling a little bit and saying, okay, what's going on here? Who's actually making decisions about this? And I found it was very bottom up. And bottom up is fine. You actually learn a lot from people who are doing things from bottom up. But it's like maybe they needed a bit of a top-down view. So it was about sort of understanding some of these things. And really, there was the exploding tech that was going on with brands. We wanted to see, okay, that digital front line, that phrase didn't exist at the time. It was just about saying apps and cool things and ways to interact, and it was just kind of really kind of growing them. So it was all about kind of really mapping to these expectations and make sure we could actually set some brand and safety controls. There were some jewels. I arrived, and there were some things there that really kind of helped establish good foundations, good trust. And first was there's a great network of contact centers. So it's not saying, okay, we need to find somebody to answer these queries. Actually, they're mostly customer queries. The telephony-based contact centers are already there doing the same thing. So let's just kind of enable them, empower them, train them to these new requirements, and we can really make sure that kind of sets us off, and saying, okay, we can enable various accounts modeled to this. There was a dedicated team based in Leeds. They were already active with the dashboards, listening, spotting HSBC mentions. It was much more mindful of reputational incidents than just general customer listening. But it was a great starting point. So we could actually do real-time listening and really make a difference there. And then we had some heroes. We had some people with those accounts who were actually doing good things. That's what I mean by the bottom up. They were really sort of pushing the envelope, really sort of making a difference in their markets or in their departments, and saying social is important, it's fundamental. But many people were non-believers. Many people thought this is new. This is something for the kids. It's just, you had the kind of myths of social media were really prevalent there. So it was about sort of tapping into their real-time knowledge, make sure that they could actually sort of contribute to something, which was an operational standard, which I think is useful. So first thing I kind of helped with was setting up a social media working group. I think this is where you kind of sort of get the main stakeholders and you find out, okay, operationally, where are we with all this? What actually needs to be done here? We're finding projects are doing well or not getting off the ground. What's stopping them? Who's in charge? Who needs what satisfied? Make sure that you have those sort of cross-functional discussions. Important thing is not one area that owns social media. It's actually a collaborative story. So it's IT, marketing, communications, and today it's probably more marketing communications, but you invite a lot of people to the same table. You need to have that safe place where you can have discussions, and then you're not going to get into trouble. You're just going to talk about what we're seeing is good practice, and maybe we make that the routine and we can give better instructions. So here were some of the areas of discussions. Do you need standalone governance of social when you don't have anything like emails or newsletters or poster campaigns having governance? It was a very weird story. But because of the cross-business story of social, you actually do. Centrally designed frame for risk, multiple cross-business use, it's just conflicting. So it's like we need better integrated and unified how we do this. So there are lots of discussions, and really the bottom one is really where we saw a lot of takeoff with social, which was the pay-to-play. So it was at the time a free-to-wear content platform for anything that brands wanted to put on. Now it's much more specific. You invest, you pay, you advertise. That's a much harder hitting way of using social, but you still need to do the basics, and that's what we're talking about here. So we identified stakeholders. This is the big round table, of course, and there's the ultimate goal. You wanted to get policies, guidelines, practices, which everyone can buy into. And I think this is a part where you have to have a little bit of imagination, a bit more sort of perseverance of getting things wrong, and then slowly transforming to make things right, and getting the right people attending to make sure their contribution is there, and it's solid, and it makes sense, and it can continue. So I've kind of mapped out a little bit like who did what, because I think everybody needs to contribute to this. You can't have one department running away and then forgetting everyone else that was supposed to be involved. So this was a bit of a new story. Just setting this out was actually quite tough. Nobody in particular has any higher importance than any other. Obviously, everybody wants to sort of go public and make things work, but there is also an old guard that says, right, maybe this is better that we don't do it like this. Maybe we just need to kind of avoid the headache. It was a bit of a hospital pass in those days. So, so I think that is one of the fundamentals, really, you've got to get right. So if you're exploring a new customer experience, make sure you have the right contributors. It's not just something which is owned by one project with all the same mindset and same point of view. You really need to invite opinion, invite practice discussions there. And then you say, what are we going to do well? So we're going to do listening and monitoring. That's great. That's always on, 24/7 real-time stuff. That's a really solid step forward. We had Radian 6 at a time, industry standard, and that kind of helped us sort of really be much more credible. And we had to kind of map out response planning for, first of all, customer service. So back to that contact center story, great network there, tap into that, really establish, if there's a team of 20, pull 3 aside, train them, make sure they're available, set the business hours, set the way you respond, tone of voice, and off you go. It should be, hopefully, as simple as that. But then also crisis response. That's where you need to get to simulations of what is a crisis. When do you actually need to step in with new people and actually say something new to answer a question or a media story. And that was actually more of the concern at the time. It was all about risk management. The reputational issue was much more prevalent, but equally, we had to value customer service because, a pissed off customer will actually create a story for you, but they're also a gift for you to manage well. So you actually have to turn that around. So rather than just being overwhelmed and say, we haven't got the volume of people to actually make this work, you say, no, we have to do this, but we have to do it kind of step by step. It's sort of like going soft, then gradually it's assumed as your BAU, your business as usual for everything that you do. Then operational principles, brand standards for business use. It sounds like so obvious now, but at the time it's about making sense of what are the platforms, what are the processes and people supposed to do together. Really making sure that is customer-centric. It's not just written for us to follow instructions and that sort of thing. And then ownership. As I said, it's global marketing, global comms. And then we have a solid process for rolling out accounts. So we know how many cattle we have in a field that are ours. Oops. It was that good, right? All right, back in. Right. So back to this. And then, and then you've got to communicate. You really have to make sure that you've done all the investigations, you know the gaps and misperceptions, and you answer them. And you really have to keep going back to them. So there was some incidents. It looks very convenient now to look back on these and say what they all did for us, but all these incidents were kind of really alarming, really shook us. So like, oh my God, let's get to the top floor, see what the management think. Senior management, they were a bit so new to this. And every one of these actually contributed to a new investment and a new appraisal of what social media had to do for the bank. So you had bloggers who were kind of tweeting the wrong email account. So, Twitter account. And that was embarrassing. You think, oh my God, there is a Twitter handle that we just didn't know about. So, we need to start taking down stuff which isn't ours. Obviously, it can only be official ones. The spike, that was a rumor spread on social that it actually prompted us to get very worried. They're going to have to make an official message about this. But it was entirely a run-of-the-bank story propagated by various things coming together. But again, it was a fright that was more like, God, I think we just dodged a bullet, but we could have overcommitted to that. So we just had to be much more sort of common sense about this and be sort of like, okay, this is a new phenomenon that we're dealing with. People communicate in new ways. Maybe we just need to kind of pay attention to that and stop reacting like it's like an urgent story. But we do have a better criteria on how that works. And then just your standard things. So what happens when we have DDoS attacks or ATM outages? You make sure that sort of thing is actually well catered to. You have better answering. IT are involved. You give time boxes for responses. They say the news cycle is 8 hours. I think a news cycle is 3 hours because then people get frustrated and they just want to see something happening. And then 3 hours later, if something is not happening, you're looking at a social media fail. And I think that's now current now, but I think in the early days, we were sort of having to instruct people so that we need to be better at this. We need to be kind of speedier, a bit more collaborative, less of the silo of IT, leave us to do our stuff. You can't have that attitude. You really kind of work together and answer to each other. And then Instagram hacks, account hacking, password management, clearly that's something that you have to worry about. Leavers and joiners, how do they work with this? Really, all of this is important. And then just saying, okay, we're using social media to actually make important changes to how we work. So this was a stricter no deforestation policy that was put on YouTube and Twitter. So I feel like that is actually, okay, we are sort of getting better at how we communicate this. And it's showing that we're taking it seriously. And we're not just kind of, okay, just casually thinking, oh, okay, it's a Me Too story. We're actually investing in this and taking it to the right, using it correctly across all our communications. So today, I'm part of a team that looks at governance, listening analytics, and strategy support. I think the adoption and alignment story, we've got 130 accounts which are sort of doing well. They all work to the same standards. We have documentation and practices. Yes, that's so cool. And we have good brand protection as a given. That's part of our team. It's a bit unusual. Normally you think that sits in cybersecurity, but we are in global marketing and we look after our own social media accounts, and I think that's important. We do reputational listening. We either get social intelligence from this. I think it's important to actually sort of, learn, discuss, really review, see where some pain points are, and actually address them. So you're not just like thinking, okay, on to the next thing. No. Pay attention. This is what people are saying. So we have great reporting facilities. We've really ramped up our how we answer, how we give internal reports to the business. and that works well. And then sort of growing on customer centricity and local insights. I think customer centricity is very important. I mean, I think social media is now amplifying and is now getting much more into messaging. Private messaging is important, but how do you allow a whole big bank sort of to do this? So that's one of the things that's kind of challenging us. This is how I think we break it down. Here are your customers. They see us on HSBC. We're on 6 platforms. We're on the big 5 Western platforms and WeChat in China and surrounding parts of Asia. And there we see like how we use it. So it's customer service, customer engagement, our investor audience through communications and media, employee engagement, so obviously employee advocacy, that story, and just business intelligence. And I think these are kind of not standard, but I think they're important and meaningful, and all those areas are well serviced and well understood there. So I think that helps us really kind of show we have a proper, well-integrated approach. Just so you know, so if these are their accounts on social, we have community managers, we have teams, they work with their agencies, their star agencies. So they do creative content, media buying, and community moderation. That's important. Community moderation is more around marketing posts, because it's down here where we have the guys in the contact center who are doing a lot more of the customer queries. So the local support, it actually feeds the community management team, and they are very much a cross-business view. They're not just kept in a silo of working with marketing. They actually, all communications. They are in touch with the business, the regulatory compliance, and legal teams to make sure that what they're doing is always on brand and performing well. And then where I sit is in the global support team, so I'm in the governance protection team. But we have access, we have a steer co, we have a working group, we have the assets and instruction from global marketing and global comms. So all of that is our kind of our internal ecosystem to make sure it's all kind of done to a good standard. We've also invested in a URL shortener. So you may know Bitly, tinyurl.com, Owly. They obscure the destination URL. You don't have those big, long URLs anymore. You have something which is short and compact, and you can actually fit it without going over the character count. We felt there was a bit of anxiety about how they were working for customers. They were apparently hackable. There have been a couple of instances with this. So we owned a .hsbc domain, and we actually created our own URL shortener, the grp.hsbc. And we have now made this a mandatory requirement for all posts with a link that they have to use this. So this is, just examples. You can see that we've applied it to M&S Bank, firstdirect.hsbc. And it's, I think it's really sort of shown that we invest, we take it seriously social, and we want to protect our customers for anything which can be hacked. I have dozens of presentations about cybersecurity, so you're not getting that today, but that's another story. Okay, so that's reliable, we're branded, and it's all clear, I think, and that helps grow trust. And I think the summary is, we have good oversight of our social media footprint. We know what's ours. We know where the fakes are. We spot them. We take them down quickly. And we have a good, clear operational baseline. I think this is critical to show that, the way things work. So if you get a call from Mexico and say, hi, I've got a problem here, I know that they followed the steps that are followed in the UK or the US or Italy or Turkey. It's just we can depend on same steps being followed. I think that's important. And then customer engagement, we're there as a pop-up. We have a pop-up experience. Those posts need to make a difference. I'm all about the content. It seems like very much sort of backroom stuff, but the content really has to be championed as well. It's about saying we get engagement, we get commentary, we get really kind of good top of mind with all that. And we have trained teams. I think that's important. So external teams are just as good as your internal teams. And we have kind of training to make sure they understand how we want to operate, how to make sure that everything is really sort of following our operational standards. And constant optimizing. That's, I think, important. Other basics that I'd like to think about is social intelligence. As I said, it's just like, what can you learn from listening? Data management, what's our approach to big data? That's a lot of consent, permissions, it's marketing preferences, make sure you understand all that. And then really, it's about showing responsible and ethical thinking. As I said, we are not regulated in this area. The platforms can operate as publishers, and they don't really get much don't see many fines really enough to really to see changes unless they are self-instigated. So I think it's about saying you have your own gold standard that you work to, and you can actually endorse a good practice for targeted advertising, audience selection tools, and consent for privacy and data. My future, my ongoing challenge now is messaging. Is about to make it how HSBC can tap into that and really make that viable and legitimate for business use, professional use. So because that's more about individuals, not about entities. It's about saying we as individuals can connect to customers, and we are going to be good at that. That's it. I think I've got. Yeah, there we go. Logo done. Any questions, guys?
You mentioned kind of internal resistance and kind of overcoming that.
Yeah.
I think probably everyone in the room encounters that in some shape or form. So
yeah.
What was your experience of overcoming that?
So the ideal answer is you have some sort of a sponsor in the executive team who actually sort of takes it seriously and is willing to kind of push you forward, drop you into good presentations, good meetings, and really sort of take a change there. You also need to be lobbying for budget. Take that seriously and how you approach that budget planning story. So you have clear investments where the outcome is known. Because if you just say I just want great content, that's good, but that's a slow grind. Because content can really you just need good metrics to follow that. But operationally, you need to invest in these things, and that it's the security, it's the risk management, which I think has helped us. So those incidents that kind of peppered our journey, they are actually good. Regrettably, they are actually good prompts to take it seriously. So, right, we can't be sort of open to such risk, can't expose ourselves like this. We have to sort of do things better. So that often helps. But always the executive sponsor. I'd always say that's a good starting point.
One question there for a minute.
Hi.
It sort of aligned to the last question. So I do a lot of work in crisis social media. So your slides about using a crisis to get the investment you need.
That's a very cynical,
really interesting.
Kind of a summary of that. It's maybe probably a little bit too
but I think
simple there.
That's the reality, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, just practically, how do you report that back in terms of and here's what we need to do next? How do you get that on that agenda, as Stuart said?
We have a steerco, so that's kind of tended by the global heads of marketing, comms, IT, contact center, and digital. So we relay back to them and say, this is what you missed this week or this last quarter, and we relay back to them. So there was an incident. We think there is an issue here. We probably need to invest in this area. It was probably kind of more common in our early days when social media just wasn't so well established. I think now it's probably a better understood way of communicating. I don't think we have so many right now. What the issue is more about kind of a crisis communication story for other countries to follow. So if they have an ATM outage or they have a DDoS, they actually need to have a better response story, and so they come to us and say, like, how do we do this? How do we manage this? And we give them those instructions. Don't throw it over the wall, but we do say, hey, we've done this before, and this is how you manage it. Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
Oh, conflict. Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
I also work at a bank and do social media amongst other things. And compliance is like the bane of my life, really.
Okay.
Especially with social media, because you mentioned the 3-hour news window. So I just wondered how you handle that, or maybe you work in a different way and you don't have to get compliance, particularly from the States.
No, we work in the same way, yeah. So we handle each post requiring standalone approvals. So, let's put a post out. Let's say I just want to put this logo up. I make sure that my marketing team knows about this. Regulatory compliance has seen this and has had an opportunity to opine about it. And hopefully we've acted on that. And there we say on a standalone basis, that is clear. And that's specific to a financial promotion. In banking, we have something called financial promotions, where you are trying to invite or induce somebody to bank with you, to transact with you. So we defined what exactly is a financial promotion on social and what are general customer communications. You have to separate them. Otherwise, for a general customer communication, communication. Here's an interview that looks good. I have to get the wording right from regulatory compliance. It can't work like that. So we have a routine in marketing where every single asset is confirmed for approvals by marketing teams and also regulatory compliance. Other parts of business, if you're recruiting, you don't want every job to be seen by a compliance person. So we call that general customer communication, that kind of content. Equally, in the communications department, if they're putting out a press release or a video or an event or a sponsorship announcement, all these things are seen as general customer communications. It's really the regulated part is really about financial promotions, that you've invited somebody to say, okay, apply for a mortgage or apply for a credit card, and that the wording has been good, it can't be misinterpreted, it's actually clear. And what you worry about is then people who share it, and then the ownership is on that person who's sharing it to actually get their wording right. So we are very clear to our employees, like, don't go crazy saying, oh, HSBC is the best mortgage lender, blah, blah, blah. You have to say it's very factual, very well represented. If HSBC is won a banking award, we say, don't go crazy saying, hey, we're the tops or something. Just say, hey, great that we're part of the winning team or something. So it's much more, your opinion doesn't color it so much. It's much more factual, the whole represent. Does that help? Is that what you're expecting? Yeah, I think for us, it was really about clarifying financial promotions. Sorry, guys, this is a real banking-specific thing. But financial promotions and general customer communications, they are very distinct and different things, and trying to do different jobs.
You're managing such a huge operation globally. How do you effectively collect all of the feedback that you're getting from clients all over the world from across so many channels?
So we have a platform that helps us connect to our accounts. We don't go natively into our accounts. We don't access Twitter or YouTube or Facebook natively. We have a platform that gives us access. We used to use Radian 6. We changed. We've got another platform. And we use that effectively, and that gives us oversight, and it also does the record keeping. This is one of the pivotal things, which I probably should have said, is that record keeping is vital in the banking industry. So all your communications, you need to have records of them for 7 years. So you just can't throw something out and expect and say, hey, it'll disappear, it'll be in the ether. No, you have to have that really recorded, and who actually has oversight to let that go live. So that's really how we manage that. We do allow autonomous decisions for markets. So if something happens in Turkey, I'd rather the Turkish team dealt with it. I don't want to be consulted for everything that's happened there. So it's saying, okay, we've empowered, given them the right instruction and the right response story for whatever happens. Okay?